Hello again, welcome back to the potting shed. Today I want to talk to you about this amazing Alocasia Dragon Scale. Now doesn't this look like something else? I'll give you a close-up of a leaf straight away. Oh my word. I think this is something straight out of Jurassic Park. You can see why they're called dragon scales. There's amazing motley leaves, so much texture. It just looks like it is some crazy prehistoric plant straight out of the Jurassic era. The leaves really are something to behold, aren't they? Just absolutely stunning. I picked this plant up at my local nursery and I must admit I couldn't walk past it. I've never actually had one of these tropical Alocasias before and I just thought it looked amazing. Now there's a reason why I haven't kept some of these sort of dual Alocasias as they call them, because they're quite tricky to look after. So if you've just bought one of these and you're looking up a care guide, then I'm going to give it to you in this video, but just be aware they are quite tricky to look after. So if you're a beginner and you've got this, you do have your work cut out for you, but if you like a challenge, then this is going to give it to you, because isn't it a stunning plant? I think it's worth the challenge, but you know, this is a proper subtropical rainforest plant, and they do need a particular type of care. But I'm going to explain all that in this video. There's some very specific things that you have to get right, but if you get all those things right, you should have a lovely, healthy and absolutely stunning houseplant to enjoy for many years to come. So these plants are native to the tropical rainforests of Borneo, where they're going to experience very high humidity, reasonable light levels, but no direct sun. So the first thing to note here is you will need to put this in a place that gets high, bright sunlight. As you can imagine, with these big, thick glaucous leaves, no direct sun, that's going to get burnt very quickly. You can get away with, as long as it's back away from the window, if some afternoon sun comes around, it has on this plant, it seems to be okay. But obviously the sort of direct midday sun is going to scorch the leaves. There is a tiny, tiny little brown spot on there that might be a tiny amount of sun scorching. But all in all, it's actually shaping up all right, considering I've only had it for probably a month now. So I've not directly sent it to the grave just yet, and it's still looking very happy. But you know, fingers crossed with this one, because yeah, there is a very specific pattern of instructions that I'm going to go over right now. By the way, if you would like one of these for yourself, they are currently in stock with Thompson & Morgan. I will put a link down below where you can get these. These are actually relatively rare houseplants, and they're getting a little bit easier to get hold of these days, but they're still fairly difficult to come by. So the link is down in the description if you would like one. I think actually for what you get and for such a beautiful plant, they're actually a reasonable price. So go check them out down in the description below. So we've already talked about light. The next obvious thing is watering. Now this is the tricky part. You don't want to overwater this. That's probably the quickest way to give this plant a problem, which is overwatering. So you do need to let it dry out a bit, but you don't want to let it stay dry. So this is where it gets tricky. You really need to keep on top of it. It's not one of these house plants that you can leave in the corner, look amazing, and just check up on it every now and again. You're going to need to, you know, put your finger in the soil and just check how that soil feels. If it's starting to dry out, then get your finger a little bit deeper down in there and feel. And actually, they don't like to be disturbed in the roots too much. So if you've got a moisture meter, I don't have it to hand. No, I don't think I do. If you've got a moisture meter, that will help you out, because you can just carefully put that down in the side of the pot as a probe. You put that down in the side, and the gauge is going to tell you whether it is dry or whether it is moist, and that will give you an opportunity to have an idea how far down in the pot the moisture is, because even if it's dry on top, it may still be fairly moist halfway down the pot. So the moisture meter will get down there without disturbing the roots too much. I'll put a link for one of those down in the description as well. They're very cheap, like £10, $10, that sort of money. Very cheap and well worthwhile with plants like this, because you do have to really be precise with the watering. So water it well and then leave it. Monitor the moisture levels, let it dry out. Once it gets to the point you think, yeah, this is dry, give it like 1 day maximum and then water again. But it does need that sort of brief period of dryness before you water it again. I think it doesn't like to be constantly wet, if you see what I mean. So there is that crossover period, but if you leave it for too long, especially in the warmer weather, if you leave it dry for too long, then you'll start going to get brown tips to the leaves and things like that. So it is a tricky thing, but I think if you pay attention to it, like every other day, it doesn't have to be a full-time job, but it is going to be one that needs more looking after than others, shall we say. Feeding should be fairly easy with this one. They don't need a huge amount of fertilisation, so when you do fertilise, I would recommend half strength and maybe once every month to 2 months in the growing season. So spring, summer, fall, early fall really, you need to knock it off. It doesn't need huge amounts, so dilute strength of whatever you would normally use. A general purpose houseplant fertiliser will be okay, but yeah, in 50% strength, whatever it says on the back, just half that should be fine with this particular plant. Humidity is the next big thing with this plant. It's going to really appreciate the higher levels of humidity. So if you have a humidifier machine, well worth getting hold of one. I'll put a link to one of those, one that I've used and found no problem with, because some of them are a little bit hinky, but the one I've got seems to work very well. I'm not actually using it at the moment because a lot of my plants are all in one place in my back porch, so it creates its own little ecosystem and its own humidity levels, because I've probably got, I don't know, 15 plants all next to each other, very close, and that proximity produces higher levels of humidity with all of the transpiration that's going on around it. So this seems to be okay. Like I said, fairly early days in its first month, but there's no sign of it going downhill. When I bought it, I don't know if you've spotted that already, the eagle eyes of you, that's not an illness. That leaf has just been cut in transit, I believe. It's just got cut there. Yeah, it's just the edges where it's got cuts gone brown, but look at the colours. I left it on there because it just looks phenomenal, doesn't it? But yeah, all the other leaves are still looking good, so fingers crossed. I've just about got the humidity and watering right at the moment, but time will only tell. I'll give you an update on how I'm getting on, obviously. If there's anything that I discover as I go along, I will update this video and give you my thoughts as we go along. But I must admit, I really do like this plant. Can you tell? Now let's move on to repotting, because this is something that is a tricky one with this as well. The roots really don't like to be disturbed. It's one of these plants that will suffer if you disturb the roots at all, really. So only repot if it's absolutely necessary. So if it's climbing out of the pot and it's absolutely full of roots, then you can repot, but try not to disturb the roots at all. I would suggest like slip potting it, which means taking the pot off, getting a bigger pot, and then just literally placing it into the new pot and then pouring the new soil around the plant without disturbing the roots at all. Now usually when repotting, I would suggest you remove the old soil, pull out the roots a little bit so they're growing in the right direction. Not worth doing with this. Leave it alone, just put it in a bigger pot as and when it needs to, but it should be fine in the pot that it's got for a reasonable amount of time, so don't worry too much about repotting. Try and leave it with minimal disturbance. Now lastly, I want to talk about toxicity, because this is a toxic houseplant for your pets and for your children, or to humans in general. It's probably not going to be a terrible thing if you're an adult and you ingest some of this, but it's unlikely that you're going to be chewing on the leaves, really, is it? So you know, you won't have any problems in your living space. If you've got small crawling children or small chewing house pets, then I would suggest keeping this well out of the way and being very careful with it, because it will give some severe stomach upsets for your pets and small children. So on the safe side, keep it well out of the way of pets and small children. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this initial care video. Indirect light, high humidity, and be careful of the watering. Water well and give it that period of drying out in between your next water. They're the key things to remember. Keep an eye on it, and the key is just to check in with it more often than your other houseplants, and then you should be okay. But let me know if you've got any other questions down below in the comments, or if you've got any experience with keeping these plants, then do let me know in the comments. If you've got any tips for me, then I really would appreciate it, because it is a beautiful plant and I would enjoy keeping it for as long as possible. So if you've had a lot more experience and you want to share some of that, then I would gratefully receive it. Right, that pretty much wraps it up. Don't forget, links down below if you want to have a go at this yourself. Subscribe for more houseplant videos. Please give it a thumbs up if you found it useful, and I'll catch you once again in another video very soon. Bye for now.